Hi, my name is Noah Katcher, and I'm a senior in the Huntsman program in International Studies and Business at Penn with concentrations in statistics and business economics and public policy. And today I'll be talking a little bit about cyclical poverty and income dynamics in the Appalachian region of the United States. Now, your first question is probably pretty simple. What exactly is the Appalachian region of the United States? Well, the first thing that anyone from the region would quickly correct you on is that it's not the Appalachian region, it's the Appalachian region. And that especially speaks to the strong cultural heritage that the region shares. Now, generally speaking, Appalachia can be considered the area that generally surrounds the Appalachian Mountains in the United States. It's primarily rural. It stretches the whole way from New York down south to Alabama and Mississippi. But for a more research-guided and specific designation, we can follow the designation from the United States government back in the 1960s when the Appalachian Regional Commission was founded by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Now, that designation defined Appalachia specifically as being 420 counties across 13 states, starting in upstate New York, traveling then down through Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, through Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then finishing in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. Now, across those 13 states, as I mentioned before, there's always been shared a rich cultural heritage. Although it stretches seemingly the entire length of the United States, there is something that's always been culturally similar amongst this entire region. Now, why has it gained attention in recent years? Well, ever since the 2016 election, a lot of people have started to care about what is happening in real America, rural America, the parts of America that they might not have ever seen or understand or grown up in or certainly not visited or traveled to. This led to the success of certain books like the memoir Hillbilly Elegy, which dominated the New York Times bestseller list for almost a year after its publishing, solely because it seemed to give a true insider's account as to what life seems to be like in the Appalachian region of the United States. Obviously, this interest has been driving American politics and American social commentary in the past few years as people struggle to understand what a true West Virginian's life might be like as they sit back in New York or San Francisco. However, as a local native, I can say that life there is truly not all that different. However, it is important to understand some of these cultural dynamics if we want to understand exactly why there's been such a shift politically there. My primary thesis in my research has always been driven by the idea of cyclical poverty. So what is cyclical poverty? It's simply the idea that we say that not only is there poverty in the region, which is absolutely undeniable today, but that it's something that is more intergenerational in nature, something that has lasted for a very long time, and something that people might be more born into than necessarily just have happened to themselves or be a function of their own decision-making or their own ability to make a living wage. Now, in order to understand this, there's really two sides to the literature to dive into. So there's the anthropological side, so there's the social issues, the cultural issues, sort of how have we gotten here today and why are people acting the way they are. And then there's the economic side, so far more the data-driven aspect, understanding how can we take what we understand about the social issues today in Appalachia and then truly translate those into numbers and understand what is the data telling us about why and what is truly driving this kind of intergenerational or long-term poverty in the region. So let's start by understanding the social, cultural, and general anthropological factors that really make up what the Appalachian identity is today. Now, a lot of the research into these types of questions began in the 1960s after the foundation of the Appalachian Regional Commission. Ever since then, quite a bit of research has gone into understanding what forms what is often called the Appalachian ethnicity, which is basically a term to help us understand what the culture is of this specific, seemingly almost arbitrary region that surrounds the mountains that range the whole way from New York to Mississippi, and how that culture can be so different from regions that neighbor it and can be so close to it. In states, for example, like Pennsylvania, where Western Pennsylvania seems much more to adhere to this Appalachian culture, while Eastern Pennsylvania seems significantly more urbanized and centered around a more Northeastern mindset. Now, a lot of this kind of research begins by looking in the late 19th century, in which the American economy has begun to industrialize quite a bit, but there's a significant amount of social repression and resistance to adopting this kind of industrialization. Rather, It seems that these types of people are focusing more on subsistence agriculture and looking to sort of stay with what their ancestors had done and what the economy had more traditionally been within the United States. This general unwillingness to adapt to an industrialized economy seemed to continue for quite a bit of time and really has always led to what seems like a lagging economy within the Appalachian region, always being 1 or 2 generations behind. Simultaneously, though, it has grown into what is also more of a proud cultural heritage, where people are more willing and feel a stronger need to perhaps engage in certain lines of employment or certain cultural practices that their parents or their grandparents and their general ancestry might have. The idea that you might have worked in a certain industry and that is the same industry that one of your parents worked in could be a great source of pride for these kinds of people, whereas for the average person it might not seem as significant. As a result, much of this research finds that Appalachia has a long-standing history of resisting modernization and always seeming more to adhere with what might be qualified as some sort of tradition as opposed to looking towards the future, looking towards working in a more innovative economy or living a more innovative or modern or technological lifestyle. Now, this translates also then to the economic side of the debate and understanding sort of what the data might be saying and what kind of economic research there might be as to why we are seeing such persistent poverty in the region. Now, to some, this seems like an obvious answer. If you're unwilling to adapt to the modern economy, if you don't want to live in what has become an increasingly and rapidly technological age, well, then obviously you might not be making as much money as, say, someone who is willing to participate in that kind of economy. Still, though, it makes one wonder how, even in the 1960s, when the Appalachian Regional Commission was formed, and there was no internet, and there was no iPhones, and there was certainly not as much technological advancement as we see today, that if their economy had been lagging back then, now why is their economy still lagging in the same way today? It seems to be that it might be indicative of a more long-term problem, and that this problem might not just be the nature of today's economy, but rather a long-standing cyclical tradition that might have led to these kinds of issues. Now, so far there has been generally pretty minimal research on poverty within the Appalachian region. The primary individual doing this kind of work is named Stephen Durlauf from the University of Chicago. And Professor Durlauf has championed a lot of the work on poverty in Appalachia and within the United States as well. In this, he writes that identification of a poverty trap or cyclical poverty in the United States, or especially within the Appalachian region, can be especially tricky. But trying to find a way to identify this is exceptionally valuable and can inform much of the policy proposals that are needed to try and fix these things, especially through institutions such as the Appalachian Regional Commission. Now, additional research has taken a look at various factors that might fuel this. So, say, why the fact that there might be fewer urban areas or little to no major metropolitan areas within the Appalachian region might be causing the fact that the economy has chosen to lag so significantly and has continued to maintain this trend for so many decades and between so many generations. Other research has taken a look at all the sorts of issues that continue to dominate today's newsfeed. So you might see people looking at research on opioids and how those inform the economic progress of the region. There's some research that looks at some historical adherence to labor unions and looking at certain industries that are especially conducive to being unionized labor and understanding how a strong adherence to that kind of work may end up resulting in a lagging economy. It's this kind of cyclical poverty and lagging income dynamics compared to the rest of the United States. My research has been most concerned with educational attainment, or lack thereof. After having taken a look at all the different factors that could be contributing to this kind of long-term change, I quickly found that looking at educational attainment, specifically the receipt of a high school diploma or a bachelor's degree, could have a statistically significant impact on your ability to earn a higher income or an income that's even tantamount to the rest of the United States throughout your life within the Appalachian region when controlling for a lot of the things we discussed before, such as, say, labor dynamics or changes in population or changes in industry. Now, this is obviously a very valuable consideration to take into account. Even in a politically divisive time, there is always some degree of certain agreement that education is a vital factor when forming American policy. And it becomes abundantly clear that the lagging attainment of higher level education, specifically a bachelor's degree and further advanced degrees within the Appalachian region, might be something that is specifically driving this kind of long-term poverty. The fact that people, not only themselves, but also their ancestors and perhaps their future children, might not be or feeling the need as much or desire to receive these kinds of advanced degrees might be the very thing that is holding them back. So giving people then greater opportunities and creating policy that hopefully encourages individuals to make this additional step to increase the level of educational attainment to a point where their incomes can indeed be higher, or at least matching the remainder of the United States, could be exceptionally valuable. So hopefully I've given you a bit of a better idea on some of the differences in economic development, educational attainment, and income dynamics within the Appalachian region. Even though it consists of 420 American counties, the Appalachian region still continues to be one of the least talked about regions of the entire United States. However, there's abundant room for further research, and I hope you'll keep it in mind going forward. Thank you.